They told you avoidants never change, that the pattern is permanent, baked in, something you either accept or walk away from, because waiting for it to shift is just waiting for nothing. After hearing that enough times, most people believe it. They stop hoping for anything different. They convince themselves the avoidant they loved will always be the avoidant they loved, frozen exactly where they left them. But what if that story is wrong? Because I am a healed avoidant, and I'm going to tell you exactly what happens in the moment an avoidant actually decides to change. And I promise you, it does not look like what you've been told. To understand that moment, you first have to understand why avoidants resist change for as long as they do. Because without this, the decision itself will not make sense. Avoidants do not avoid change because they like the pattern, or because the distance feels good, or because they are comfortable with what it costs them. Research on adult attachment is consistent on this point. They avoid change because the pattern has been protecting them since long before they had the language to understand what was protecting them from. Somewhere early in life, closeness came with a price attached. Maybe it meant losing yourself to someone else's needs. Maybe it meant being seen so clearly that the scene became dangerous. So the nervous system built a wall, brick by brick, and that wall did its job so well for so long that touching it, let alone taking it down, feels like removing the only thing standing between safety and collapse. That is why change does not come easily. It is not stubbornness. It is architecture. And no one tears down architecture without a very good reason. Most people assume the decision to change comes from love. They imagine the avoidant looking at someone they care about, feeling the depth of that connection, and deciding right then to finally be different for them. It is a beautiful idea, and it is almost never how it actually happens. Love alone has never been enough to move an avoidant nervous system off its foundation. If it were, every relationship would have already done it. What love can do is make the cost of staying the same finally visible. But visibility is not the same as decision. Plenty of avoidants see the cost clearly and still do not change, not because they do not care, but because seeing the cost and being ready to face what cause are two entirely different thresholds. This is where most relationships actually get stuck, and it rarely looks like indifference from the outside. The avoidant can name the pattern out loud. They can apologize for it, study it, even explain its origins in detail to the person standing across from them. None of that is the same as the nervous system agreeing to let the wall down. Insight without readiness just becomes another form the wall takes, a more articulate version of the same distance, dressed in language that sounds like progress. That is why love, awareness, and even genuine remorse can all be present at once. And the pattern still holds, because none of those things alone are the thing that finally moves it. The real shift starts somewhere quieter than a relationship ending or a partner begging for something different. It starts in a space after the pattern has already cost them something specific, something they cannot explain away with the usual reasons. Not immediately, but somewhere in the stretch of time after the relief of distance stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like a sentence they handed themselves. It shows up first as exhaustion, the kind that has nothing to do with sleep, the exhaustion of running the same defense on a loop, year after year, relationship after relationship, and ending up in the same empty room every single time, regardless of who was on the other side of the wall. It shows up as noticing the pattern from the outside for the first time, almost like watching footage of yourself, and realizing the common variable in every collapsed connection was never the other person. It was the architecture. That noticing does not produce change by itself, but it produces the first crack in the belief that the pattern was actually working. There is usually a long, quiet stretch between that first crack and the actual decision, and almost nothing about it looks like progress from the outside. The avoidant keeps pulling away when things get close, keeps reaching for distance like it still works, even while some part of them has already started to doubt it. This is not hypocrisy. It is lag. The behavior keeps running long after the belief underneath it has started to wear thin, because the pattern was never built through logic, and logic alone cannot take it apart. During this stretch, the relief that used to come from distance starts arriving later and thinner, while the guilt that used to come later, if at all, starts arriving almost immediately. That reversal is one of the clearest signs a foundation has already begun to shift, long before anything visible changes. The moment a decision actually happens is almost always the same, and it is rarely dramatic. It is not hitting some rock bottom moment that gets cried about afterward, though that can sometimes accelerate what is already underway. It is not a single ultimatum from someone who finally walked away, though that too can speed things up. It is quieter than either of those things, and far more specific. It is the moment the cost of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of finding out who you are without the wall. That is the entire decision, distilled down to its core, not a sudden burst of courage, not a transformation that arrives overnight, just a simple, exhausted calculation where the math finally flips, where staying exactly the same for the first time feels more frightening than the unknown on the other side of it. And once that calculation flips, it does not flip back easily, because now the pattern is not protecting anything. It is just costing something over and over, and here's what that moment actually produces, which is almost never what people expect. It does not produce a fixed person who has suddenly figured everything out. It produces a willing person, which is a completely different thing, and arguably a much harder one to sustain. Willingness means sitting in the discomfort the wall used to block, instead of converting it into distance the way the nervous system has done automatically for years. It means catching the urge to pull away in real time and choosing to stay anyway, even when staying feels like standing in a room that is on fire. It is not graceful. It is not linear. There will be relapses into the old pattern, moments of pulling back out of pure habit before catching it and stepping forward again. This is the part that matters most if you are watching someone go through this, or if you are the one going through it yourself. Deciding to change is not the same as having changed. Those are two completely different stages, separated by a long stretch of effortful, unglamorous practice. The decision is just a door opening. What happens after the door opens is where the actual work lives, and that work does not happen in a single dramatic scene. It happens in hundreds of small, repeated choices that nobody is there to witness or applaud. What makes this stage different from every earlier attempt is that the pain no longer gets absorbed back into the pattern itself. In the past, feeling the cost led straight back to retreat, and the retreat would briefly numb the very thing that caused it, a closed loop that fed itself indefinitely. Now the retreat stops numbing anything. The distance stops providing cover. And because there is nowhere left inside the old system put the discomfort, it has to be carried instead, openly, without the usual exit available. And if you have been waiting for someone to reach this moment, or if you are the one standing at the edge of it right now, I want you to know something important. The wall was never built out of malice. It was built to survive something real, and it did its job for exactly as long as it needed to. None of that erases what the pattern cost the people on the other side of it. But it does mean the decision to change, when it finally comes, is not random, and it is not owed to anyone. It comes from a person finally becoming more afraid of staying the same than of facing what they have spent years avoiding. And that fear, redirected, is the same fear that built the wall in the first place. It just finally pointed in a new direction. Nobody hands that redirection to them. It has to come from inside, on its own timeline, which is exactly why it can never be forced from the outside, no matter how much someone on the other side of the wall might wish it could be. Now I want to hear from you. Have you watched someone reach this moment and actually follow through on it? Or are you the one feeling that exhausted calculations start to shift inside you right now? Drop it in the comments. What you share might be exactly what someone else needed to read today. And if this gave you something real, subscribe. Because next week we are going into what the actual work looks like after the decision is made, the specific moments where the old pattern tries to take back control, and how to tell the difference between real change and a temporary burst of motivation that fades the second things get hard again. That is a video you will not want to miss.